Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm Victor Smith. Tonight, protests on college campuses potentially canceling graduation ceremonies. Also, Kristi Noem commits political suicide. But first, today is the birthday of King Willem Alexander of the Netherlands, as we're recording. Happy birthday, Your Majesty.
Happy birthday, sir. We hope the weather is nice this time of year over in the Netherlands.
All right. And I suppose people wanted to actually talk about the Netherlands, so let's do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Joining me on the stage are Water Cube, Frederick, and William Stout. Clemens Magnolia will be joining us later in the evening.
thank you, Victor. Well, I want to get started by saying it's very, very interesting with Dutch history because the Netherlands, as many people might know and many people might not, is very interconnected with English history, and therefore, to an extent, it's very interconnected with American history. From topics such as the Glorious Revolution to our intertwined political interests during the rise of both the English nation and the Dutch nation in
and also
France and Spain. So our nations are inevitably interconnected, and I feel like that Dutch history needs to be given more of a stage than it is.
Oh yeah, and also the Roosevelts are also from the Netherlands.
Right, of course. There's several very prominent Dutch,
and also one of our cities, or one of our states, New York, was named New what was it?
New Amsterdam, yeah.
Yeah, New Amsterdam, until the English came over and called it New York.
Right,
were all the Quakers that came over the United States English Quakers, or were some of them the Dutch Quakers?
I don't know if there were any Dutch Quakers. I always thought Quakers was a very, very English phenomenon.
Yeah.
Apparently, there was a couple Dutch Quakers or something.
I know Dutch Puritans were very big with New Englanders, since the Netherlands was a big Calvinist stronghold.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions or want to say anything about that, you can say that in the chat.
Yes. But
and we'll read them out loud.
I will be the first to admit I'm not a very well-informed person when it comes to Dutch history. I wish I had more information on it. But it seems that at least Dutch history, at least in a way that, in any meaningful way, begins with the late Holy Roman Empire, primarily around the time that it was under the control of Burgundy, but also during the time of the Hanseatic League. And we start to see this idea of the... Did I cut out?
No,
you didn't cut out.
No, you didn't cut out.
Sorry, I accidentally closed out, so I was like... Anyway, so where was I? So we start to see primarily the formation of a sort of Dutch identity in the very late 15th, early 16th centuries with the merger of the Hanseatic League and also the autonomy granted to it under the Burgundian state.
And also, was it Belgium too?
Well, Belgium at the time wasn't really considered separate from the Netherlands. Flanders.
Yeah, because the Belgians had two different distinct groups.
The Walloons and the other one.
Yeah, well,
I know the Walloons are the French one, but like for most of history, it's been if you spoke the same, you kind of were able to have a similar identity or able to identify with one of each other. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
The Netherlands wasn't even a united monarchy until after the Napoleonic Wars.
Go ahead, finish your thought, Victor.
The provinces were essentially And they were run by people called stadtholders, and probably the most powerful stadtholder was the House of Orange-Nassau. Yes, that Nassau in the Bahamas is named for this house. And its head at one point, and it became the most powerful stadtholder when a certain stadtholder named William married a Princess Mary of England. And
I'm sure.
Ever since then, the stadtholder of Orange became the de facto most powerful stadtholder in the Netherlands and became the monarch of the same in 1815. Before then, the land was controlled as a part of the Habsburg Empire. It was contested between the Spanish, and then there were a few. The Protestant Reformation was actually part of the changing the guard of the Protestant Reformation. The Netherlands wanted to be independent. They were Protestants from the Catholic Habsburgs in Spain. So they decided to rebel and became their own independent state.
Right. Thank you for that, Victor. But
and fun fact.
Here's a funny thing.
Gentlemen, one at a time. Victor, go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
And
so
also,
gentlemen.
So you remember that one time where they literally ate their prime minister?
That's a neat little fun fact.
In a moment, we will.
It's a pretty interesting story of how they did that.
Power. But
the other point that I was going to make was that the orange in the flag of the Republic of Ireland was for William of Orange.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, and thank you for that brief history, Victor. But it seems to me, at least by what I've learned, that the Netherlands came about in a lot the same way that Switzerland came about, where rather than a unified state with a unified identity, it started out as a confederation of independent states with common interests deciding to work together.
Yeah.
And that's where the main conflict comes from, because the Netherlands in its infancy was not a monarchy. It was a republic. And so the Netherlands, the Netherlands, I think, is a very good example for us as American monarchists, because it's one of those examples of a nation that became a monarchy relatively gradually and peacefully, albeit with some bumps in the road and actual conflicts, but
as peacefully as you can really get when it comes down to creating a state.
Right, and forging a national identity and such. But so basically, judging by what I know, is that, of course, as Victor said, we have the House of Orange. But the House of Orange being one of the several state owners, some of them being more Republican merchant plutocracies, and others being hereditary monarchies with hereditary identities. Well, hereditary governments, not identities. And so we have this mixture of common interests. And so for the most of its early history, the Dutch was a republic confederacy called the United Provinces. That was until a set of disastrous conflicts ended up causing them to really lose political influence and their power in the world. And this goes into what Frederick V was talking about here. Frederick here talking about them killing the prime minister and eating him because he was such a failure.
Sometimes you get angry, sometimes you get hungry. It's a resolution for both.
Yes, but I've never been so hangry with whoever's in charge.
I'm wondering how they did it. Did they just put him on a pitchfork and then they just put him in an oven and then they...
No, I think they just ate him raw. There's other incidents of this, not in the Netherlands, but in medieval China, where like when they got mad at one dude, sometimes they would just like cannibalize him. When people get angry, they kind of go back to base instincts if you mess up that badly.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they took him and I think a couple of his higher ministers, they tied them to stakes. Like, I wouldn't use the term crucify them, but as if you were trying to burn someone at the stake, a stake like that. And they literally cut them up, disemboweled them, and started shaving pieces off of them while they were still alive and passing them out to the crowd.
That's some cultural revolution type beat. Like,
I don't even know where to go for this. Like, how many countries in the world have history who say, "Oh yeah, we got so mad at our leaders that we overthrew them and then ate them." Like this, I think this is the only the only instance in history where the term "eat the rich" is actually applicable in this instance.
Again, you gotta think about it. Cultural Revolution China and China, like throughout most of its history, had incidences of cannibalism among nobles or among leaders, or the people cannibalizing their leaders.
Yeah, we also got someone in the chat saying, "Well, that's the most impeachable, or impeachment, I think."
Anyway, Watercube mentioned a cultural revolution in the Netherlands. We're undergoing the throes of our own little cultural revolution, as it were. The students on college campuses are protesting again. They are protesting on behalf of Palestine, and the class of 2024, some colleges have actually canceled their graduation services. Now remember, this was the high school class of 2020 who were robbed of their graduation services because of COVID. 4 years later, some of them are or could potentially be being robbed of their graduation ceremonies because of protests on their college campuses.
Well, at least in this instance, it's their own dang fault because half of them are probably the ones protesting.
And like the other thing is the clear escalation happening in these protests. Like, I've seen the photos of the snipers on the roofs and all the belligerents from multiple different like police units in different cities. Like that is looking like it's ramping up to be another Kent State. There's going to be a massacre at some point because someone's going to escalate something too far, and I'm like, who knows what's going to happen.
Well, I've also been seeing on Twitter a lot of people talking about the hostile anti-Semitism that's been going on in tangent with these protests, and how a lot of Jewish students are afraid to go to their campuses, and how
and even the teachers that are Jewish.
Well, here's the thing. There's also a division in like American Jewry. There's a bunch of Jews that are also against Israel and for Palestine that have been out protesting, mixing anti-Semitism. There's going to be outside agitators coming in. There's going to be so much going on because America does have a very large undercurrent of conspiracy theory and anti-Semitism, like in all parts of life, left, right, center. And that stuff's going to emerge during this. And crackdowns against it aren't going to really help. Canceling stuff isn't really going to help. There's a cultural issue that causes this anti-Semitic backlash mixed in with reasonable complaints about Israel's treatment of the Palestinian people.
Right.
And the canceling of events because of these protests, it could lead to even stronger anti-Semitism because they will quite literally blame the Jews for canceling their college graduation, and this will cause an even further radicalization.
I would argue that it probably wouldn't go that way.
Well, I've already seen a whole lot of people pointing out the fact it's like, all right, back in 2020, 4 years ago, during all the Black Lives Matter protests, police were being some police weren't responding to the violent protests for Black Lives Matter. Some police were even joining the protests. But here, for the anti-Israel, the pro-Palestinian protests, we're seeing an incredible police response and a very timely police response. What gives? And honestly, I can't help but say they got a point. They really got a point.
The state in itself, like the entire nation state of America, has vested interest in keeping Israel around and liked by the American people, because Israel kind of is the thing keeping a balance in the Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that works in our favor if Israel and Saudi Arabia get along to go against Iran. So we want Israel to be liked over here. And that's why the police are going to react harsher to any anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian protest.
It makes sense. I'm just saying that this unequal response isn't helping.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like not fueling the conspiracy theories.
If someone's like can make very small line connections, they can easily come to the wrong conclusion that, oh, it's the Jews doing this. That's why there's a huge popularization in the early 2000s of Illuminati, NWO, and all that tends to connect back to the quote-unquote Rothschild family, stuff like that, which just becomes like a mask and a way to introduce people to anti-Semitism. Like Alex Jones kind of acted as a vanguard to readying like the American right and the American left, the ones that were more like conspiracy theory or hippie ideated for anti-Semitism.
And you also have sites like 4chan also spreading.
Well, 4chan, like with 4chan, it was Gamergate occurred, and that's when 4chan's identity shifted heavily, like with the creation of the pull board, which was meant to be a containment board, where people heard about how bad 4chan was, and it drew them to it. So it was drawing these people who were already like Alex Jones and stuff like that. If you've ever gone on the pull board of 4chan, there's a guide for people who are older to like use the website so they can see the QAnon stuff.
And of course, we should also probably talk about, like, shouldn't these, and of course, college students, and we should also probably laugh at the fact that the current administrators were the same college students who were protesting Vietnam in the 60s.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not even going to laugh and I'm pretty sure this is 110% where our modern activist class in academia comes from. It comes from those kids back in the 60s and 70s who were protesting back then and just never left campus. They became professors and everything. So no, I don't think that's coincidental at all.
One thing is,
of course, and we can make mention of, well, maybe there's a point to someone saying that there has been a march through the institutions.
Yeah.
But let's not dive too deeply into that right now. Let's keep the focus on these protests. And there have been, and you mentioned, and Kent State was brought up a little bit earlier. There was actually a shooting, I think it was a year ago, at the University of Virginia where football players who were preparing to get drafted by the NFL were killed.
Explain. I didn't hear about that story.
Right, so back to the
hang on a second.
Israel-Gaza thing, because someone was saying something in the chat saying, I don't personally pick a side.
Hang on a second.
Okay, with the shooting at UVA, right? Like, what I'm more talking about with when I mentioned Kent State was police or National Guard action against students. From what I'm reading this, which is just the Wikipedia article, it was like student violence compared to but the acceptance, like the fact that we didn't know about and that wasn't a tragedy that got on national news also shows our desensitization to that violence. And but I think either there's going to be a harsh police response or National Guard response to some of these protests that may cause it to turn violent, and that's what I'm expecting and alluding to with Kent State.
And of course, and you might be, and you might be right. However, there is, of course, I'm not sure about the politics of the college students today, but I am sure that the same sort of youthful vigor on the right and on the left who are going to perhaps the same institutions. There might be I'm not sure if there's going to be a violent clash.
Oh, there already is. I
there
remember
already is.
seeing footage of frat boys basically being employed by the police to take protesters' personal items and just throw them in a truck.
That is not good.
Yeah,
That's not good.
The police basically formed a perimeter around them while they were basically just taking all this stuff and taking it for themselves and just driving off with it.
Hiring frat boys as basically a fry corp. That is not something I wanted to see in the 21st century America, but here we are.
Like, I've said this before and I'll say it again.
The American Fry Corps.
Well, we don't have the American Fry Corps just yet, but this summer, I'm betting this summer is going to be a riot summer. There's going to be a huge reaction on both the left and the right, and it's going to explode. It's not going to be an apocalypse, but the election's too contentious, and everything is just too contentious, and there's no sense of stability.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for something to kick off. I remember 2020 vividly. 2020 was the election that made this organization, and I'm pretty sure everyone here who's a veteran of this organization and a veteran of this movement is sitting here waiting and thinking to ourselves, gee, what's going to be the George Floyd moment for this election? What is going to be that match that gets dropped in the
gasoline
powder keg that just sets everything up?
Like, I don't think it's going to be one incident now, because everyone, the Zoomers, again, people who went through COVID, missed their high school graduation, missed that socialization from the COVID era, they're now coming to age. It's their year to graduate. We're gonna get a whole summer of love out of them. We're gonna see a revive of stuff like hippie movement. We've seen a rise of astrology, occult stuff. We're living in a mixture of the 70s and the 1920s with a mixture of crime and instability socially and culturally.
Yeah,
we're gonna see some interesting things. Be prepared for a lot of cults.
It's like Weimar Germany going on, but
I can't tell you how much I dislike hippies.
They are the most fascistic kind of people out there. When you actually look into the hippies, half of them were racists, half of them were huge. They just hated everyone unless they could fuck them. That was literally it.
I hate the fact
and some of them were just live life kind of thing.
Well, the ones that were live life, the most often one of the main guys behind MK Ultra was a beatnik and then later a hippie. He was in the MK Ultra basically spawned the hippie movement by giving all these intelligentsia LSD, and these were all right wing reactionary pro death squad. And but it's just a mess. Look into the Children of God if you want to just learn something disgusting about the hippie movement. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And get ready for something like that to come about again, because we're going to see that cycle repeat.
Yeah, get ready for the Summer of Love, Part 2.
Oh, I'm with you there, just groaning at the idea of this.
Hey, it's good for us. It's good for everyone, because as soon as these ideas are floundering, people are looking everywhere for new things.
Yeah.
This becomes appealing a lot more to the mainstream because people are giving up hope in the main system.
Yeah.
Right, but
I know. It's just
electric boogaloo.
I don't want to deal with hippies. It's just I hate hippies.
They won't be hippies like they were back in the day. It would be hippies like our modern day version of a hippie, which can range from an alt girl to a goth guy. It could be anything. I think the revival scene was the revival of those hippies.
That's even worse. I don't need some TikTok kids walking up to me is yo, what's up, fam? No cap, blah, 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 blah. That's even worse. I'm going to lose brain cells listening to half these people talk. Oh, my Lord. No. Now, okay. Now that I'm done ranting
I'm not going to lie. They did make a lot of good music during that time.
They did, and that's about the only redeeming quality. Hang on a second. West Hall would like to come up and say something. So I would like to welcome up a man by the name of Blessed Carl Enjoyer. You'll welcome up. Hello, introduce yourself, please.
My name is Carl. Y'all can just call me Carl. And what I would like to say about this, what you were talking about, how America... Did you say 1970s or 1920s? Let's just specify that.
I was saying a mixture of both. The instability of the interwar period, because we have such an uncertainty geopolitically, along with the cultural uncertainty of the 1970s.
Yes. I was going to say, because I've been reading a book about the Spanish Civil War, and I really do think America's shaping up to be the next Spain in the 1930s, because if you look at it, there's a huge political divide, because, I mean, the political divide in this country is huge, just like Spain, you know, and not to mention, we don't have a lot of minor parties that get elected, so we won't have to worry about coalition governments failing and whatnot, but we're electing incompetent people, and we're also electing people that I would argue are malicious. Just like Spain.
I'd want to say, though, in comparison with Spain, we don't have the same history as Spain. We didn't have the dicta blanda preceding the Republican era. Like, the Spanish Republic, when it went into a civil war, was still an infantile republic. It was not fully formed and did not have that full national identity, including the instability of the interwar period and the political exacerbations that happened during that, and then the Spanish flu. Like, the Spanish Civil War, I would say, is incomparable to really most other civil wars. Like, America also isn't likely to go into a civil war. It's just going to undergo something kind of like the Year of Lead in Italy. Years of Lead.
I would in my opinion, if we ever see some kind of political conflict in the U.S., it's going to be like it's going to be like
minor
kind of troubles in Northern Ireland, except instead of being based on religious identity, it's going to be like religious and ethnic identity. It's going to be based off of political identity.
One thing that should be mentioned,
troubles, my friend,
like, is that we've kind of been in a low-level civil war against white nationalist insurgents since like the 1960s. Same with some leftist groups like Weather Underground, the Symbionese Liberation Army, etc., but mostly from the right with groups like White Aryan Resistance, the Order, which did multiple bank robberies and political assassinations, and that's not even getting into stochastic terrorism, which has become the name of the game of the neo-Nazi right.
And there isn't really that much left-wing, political action really anymore, except Antifa.
And Antifa's purely reactive. It's like Antifa shows up when the Nazis show up, and then they kind of have a dick measuring contest with Patriot. That's what they do. That's what they get up to. That's their free time.
Cube, I have to ask a question. You said something. Just backtrack if you can. Golly, what did you say? What type of terrorism is the neo-Nazis doing now?
Stochastic. It's often like arbitrary or random, or oftentimes lone wolf attacks. Like, there's people planning. Zoltanus comes to mind specifically. He was a member of Atomwaffen division, and he specifically planned on going into the National Guard during the BLM protests and riots and shooting into the crowd to exacerbate and cause a civil war, because a lot of the more radical neo-Nazis nowadays follow accelerationism. They want the system to collapse so their ideology can rise from the ashes.
Speaking of the Atomwaffen... Sorry, you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of, this accelerationism is not only a right-wing thing, but
there's left-wing accelerationists. But I'm saying that right-wing accelerationism is the dominant faction in the radical neo-Nazi movement.
Yeah, and it's also in the Trump faction, too. Like, figures like Steve Bannon, if you know.
I've always thought accelerationists were crazy. The idea of intentionally helping your opposition because you believe that your opposition would cause more damage and that would help your ideology. Not only do I feel like that's politically extremely irresponsible and risky, but I feel like it's just psychotic. The idea of going out of your way to intentionally cause more harm and hurt people just because it puts you in a more advantageous position. It just seems evil to me.
Well, okay, a true accelerationist, a fully formed and one that's ready to self-actualize, would kill themselves in order to further history. Because it's a sense of historicism and progress that's inevitable, or that the system is bound to collapse and needs to be reborn. Like, I've read a fair bit of accelerationist and some of the guys who inspired accelerationists, specifically George Bataille, and I can understand their mindset through the context, like, of how they develop their ideology. Like, right-wing accelerationism, I don't fully get, but left-wing ones and even the centrist ones, I understand.
Like, I always thought that accelerationism was futurism in a sense, because, you know...
No. The futurist movement, like, there's elements of accelerationism. Like, you could see how acceleration was gained from futurism, but futurism was not in itself accelerationist.
Right.
And and to go back to these protests, like, I'm going to ask the question, do we think that, let's assume that trends continue and the American psyche of your generation is as pro-Palestine as is perceived. What does that mean for the? Okay, first of all, I should ask if that's true, and second of all, if it is true, then what would that mean for American geopolitics in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
I'd say that, like, Gen Z and, like, the younger generations aren't as pro-Palestine as it seems. There's a lot of people who are pro-Palestine, and there's also a fair few who are pro-Israel. But I think a lot of people just are in that center of apathy, like apathetic.
Right.
And you also have people that don't support either side.
Yeah, that's what I mean by apathy.
Like a third position.
Like, because there's no one really knows the answer to the like Palestinian-Israeli question outside of a one-state solution for either the Palestinians or the Israelis. No side will be happy until that point.
Like, some people said that, you know, there shouldn't be a Jewish state, neither a Palestinian state, but instead, like, because the area is very important for the major three.
Blessed Carl, return to the audience. Thank you for coming up, Carl.
But when it comes down to it, like, I don't think there's any major implication. Like, well, there might be an implication of America breaking more with Israel on certain issues, like, because Israel under America's watch was able to get away with a fair bit. But now we're kind of seeing Israel being less favored. I don't think it's going to be a complete break with Israel. I don't think it's going to be anything that's like, oh, America now just only recognizes the Palestinian state, because I don't think we'll ever reach that point, since Palestine's right now divided between the PLO and Hamas. Like, they're not politically unified to get that recognition.
Right, and you know, I saw an interesting video, since you mentioned that, about I think he was the son of one of the founders of Hamas, and he was on a talk show, I forget which talk show, and he was talking about the situation in Palestine and explaining how Palestine works from a Palestinian perspective, and he said there is not a unified Palestinian, basically, government idea or faction. It's just you have several different factions and tribes that represent interests, not only just like the Palestinian Authority, the West Bank, and Hamas, but the individual cities have their own interests and their own ideas, and it's like Palestinians only have a united front so long as the state of Israel exists. If the state of Israel didn't exist, they'd start fighting each other because they wouldn't be able to agree on what Palestine is.
So essentially it would be a bunch of tribes against each other.
One thing to mention, though, is that to an extent, Israel did encourage these divides. They did a divide and conquer tactic with most of the region that they've either been colonizing or occupying. So, like, that was exacerbated over time. In the early existence of the Palestinian state, there was a unified idea, but it slowly just degenerated over time because a state under pressure, especially a state that's being interfered with on a whole high level, it's not going to last.
And there was really no idea of a Palestinian state. There was just Israel, or Judea, depending on what you want to call it back then.
Well, it's Israel. Like, I don't think it makes sense to call it Judea. Well, it should be called Judea, though. Actually, now that I think about it.
The reason that the kingdom of Judea existed historically is because of the region around it was called Judea. So, and that's where the name Jews come from, but the Israeli people collectively have always been called Israel.
Well, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about how the actual kingdom of Israel was the Samaritan kingdom. It's also kind of messed up that the Samaritans do not have right of return because they chose the wrong mountain. That's I can't get over that. Same with like the treatment of Palestinian Jews. Like, there's all Israel has problems. Zionism as an ideology has a lot of issues.
Speaking of politics that have a lot of issues, let's talk about Miss Kristi Noem, who committed political suicide with a story she tells in her book, and our Vice Chancellor is here to tell us about it.
Oh, God.
I'm not here really to tell you about it. I wanted to talk about this issue because I honestly found it really stupid at the fact that people are completely losing their minds over this.
Oh,
I mean,
come on, man.
I haven't been able to really I haven't really been able to read most of it due to the fact that I've been at work for half the time, but from what I've been able to tell, she shot her dog, who I've seen some people call it a puppy. From what I can tell, it was about 14 months old, which, depending on the breed of dog, isn't a puppy. It's basically an adult. So I would say a younger dog. And if anyone asking, we're talking about the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, in which she wrote a book about herself, and she told how a few years ago she shot one of her hunting dogs because it apparently refused to actually listen to her, and it had attacked some of her neighbor's chickens, and so when her children weren't home, she took that dog and a goat and shot them both. And
wait,
it's quite interesting.
Shoot the goat too. By the way, hello.
Goat collateral kill.
The goat collateral. Well, okay, I don't know what was with the goat. I mean, for all we know, the goat might have just needed to be put down. So
maybe you just want a goat meat for your curry, like goat meat's good. I mean, have you ever eaten goat?
No, but I mean, it's whether or not why she shot the goat. That's not really a matter of contention, though, because nobody really cares about the goat. It's just the dog that they care about, and this kind of just. I don't know why this is just something really big for me, but just the fact of how people are reacting. People are completely losing their minds over this, and I'm just so confused. It's a dog. Okay, hold on. Is it sad? Yes. It is sad. I won't deny that. But this isn't her shooting a guy in the face while out hunting. Okay?
Yeah, that is true. This isn't a
Dick Cheney thing.
We as a society created websites like Does the Dog Die? And people avoid films based on seeing a dog die. Our society is not at all acclimated to the idea of death, especially to death to things we like.
Yeah. And I mean, just the fact that, like, even some of my coworkers, one of my coworkers said that she ought to be shot for shooting the dog. And I'm just like, why? Okay, hold on. Let me finish my point, though. Why is it that we as a society put such a high bar, such a high pedestal for dogs, but even for our own fellow man, very often we just don't give a crap?
Because we're a moralist society that likes to value things that we can hold to an ideal compared to an actual reality. Because our fellow man will always fail us. But if we can idealize the dog, we don't have to worry about our fellow man.
Yeah. I find it, quite frankly, really stupid, and just I lose hope in the American population more than I already have working in retail.
Well, no, it is a stupid thing.
That's saying something.
And of
Speaking of
course,
working in retail,
people
how
put
are you
this
tonight, Clements? How was work?
I was 10 hours today, the longest I've ever had to work. Thankfully, I didn't have any mean customers. In fact, today I had some very nice customers, so I'm happy.
That
Wonderful.
always makes the day more
So-
tolerable.
It does.
but of course, he has a point. The Vice Chancellor has a point. American society is so up in arms about a politician shooting a hunting dog, yet when it comes to the slaughter of tens of millions of babies in the womb, crickets.
I think, well, I would say that I'm going to play the devil's advocate here and say that there is still for them, it's a bit of a difference between the two of them. I'll play the devil's advocate on that part. But, it's still a point, though, that should be made. And not even just that, but just the fact of how many people are still suffering out in the world, and nobody really cares. You see, and what is it? I think it's a quote related to Stalin when he said, "One death is a tragedy. 1,000 is just a statistic." And I think this is really what it comes down to, is the fact that this is one death, and thus it is a tragedy, because she shot a dog. And from what I can tell, people are acting as if she absolutely butchered it. Oh, it was horrible. She butchered the dog. It's like, no, she just shot it once. She didn't shot it and made it suffer. Take this dog. She just shot it. Back of the head. Boom. Done. She didn't want it to suffer. And I can't deal with this, because I'm sorry. It's just it greatly annoys me to the fact that the American population is just losing their mind over this, and they want her to resign. They want her to be punished for this is an act of animal cruelty. It's like,
I mean, it is. It really is. But that's besides
The
the point.
dog.
Is it? I don't know the legal laws about that. Which I need to check.
Damaged
I
a
think you just
neighbor's
kill a dog.
chickens.
I don't think there's any penalty. It depends on what you do with the body. There's disposal stuff for that, because it's technically a waste.
Maybe we need more information on this, but I don't know. Just the idea of, killing the chickens. Okay, if there's chickens and destruction of property involved, if the animal caused destruction of property, I have heard of owners shooting their dogs if their dogs cause destruction of property or harm another animal, because that
I mean, that is what it did. It did proceed to try and attack a neighbor's chicken, is what she said.
Yeah, if that happened, if
Okay. So I found the official. So in South Dakota, because she's the governor of South Dakota, the law is cruelty to animals is defined as, quote, mistreatment, torture, or cruelty of an animal is an act or omission whereby unnecessary, unjustifiable, or unreasonable physical pain or suffering is caused, permitted, or allowed to continue, including acts of mutilation. Inhuman treatment is defined as any act of mistreatment, torture, cruelty, neglect, abandonment, mutilation, or inhumane slaughter. Poisoning, intentionally killing, and inhumane treatment of animals are all Class 1 misdemeanors with a fine of up to $1,000 and/or imprisonment up to 1 year. Exceptions are made for generally accepted practices of training, use of animal husbandry, farming, hunting, protection of life, limb, or property, research, and veterinary care. Okay. You can make a point. You can certainly make a point that it would fall under South Dakotan law of animal cruelty, but I think we would have to really make call it as animal cruelty or not. Yeah.
We would need to know. We would need to know if the animal suffered, basically.
I'm gonna invite up our friend Argan.
Hello.
He has something to want to say. Yes, sir.
No, I just wanted to say, hello.
Oh, hello.
Do you have anything
Hi.
to add for this, or?
I'm not really sure how to feel about this because, the dog did attack somebody else's animal, so I guess it's kind of fair. But I'm not sure if you could have done something different. I would have tried to do something different, but that's he was attacking another animal, so it's just kind of fair.
I know that in some places that if your animal attacks another animal or causes damage to property, you can put down the animal, and that helps protect you from legal liability. My uncle had 2 dogs. He has 1 now, and the reason he has 1 is because one of his neighbor's dogs mauled his other dog, and in order to for his neighbor to protect himself from legal liability, he put down his dog. He shot his own dog in order to protect himself from legal liability. But I don't know if maybe that's a state of Ohio thing, if that's just a legal loophole that's exploited. I don't know how that works.
Okay, I just want to, forgetting about the dog, this is just a failure of marketing by, whoever her publicist was to not, say, hey, that might look bad on you. Just
clearly no one proofread this.
Yeah. I want to focus on that. That's just a failure of a system right there.
Yeah. And I'm being honest, I'm really mad about this because this has ruined her entire, basically, as
electability.
As a VP candidate for Trump?
Yeah, as a possible vice presidential candidate. Because I'm gonna be honest, I really liked her, and I thought she would be a really good candidate for the vice presidency. And now she's basically killed it off. Now this might not be completely true though, because of the fact that it's the media, and they switch stories left and right as soon as possible. As soon as they find something juicier, they'll immediately go after that. But this is going to be something that I think will haunt her for the rest of her political campaign. I'm pretty sure this is probably just going to be as every other political news story. It'll last for maybe 3 days, if we're lucky, and then afterwards it'll just die off, because we already know there's other issues going on. There's the protests in the colleges. There's wars.
Okay, actually,
I'm just mentioning those again. The fact there's more pressing stuff going on than the governor saying that she shot her dog.
I want to mention something. I remember
criminal trials are going on at the same time. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember a while ago there was some scandal around Sarah Palin for something kind of vaguely similar, and that just bumped up and then went away instantly because people had the memory of goldfish.
If I remember correctly,
it'll die off. But the Democrat, if Trump does want to choose her, I know for a fact the Democrats will eventually come back and just try and use this against her. Especially since this is probably going to be a very, very good way to win over female voters, because of the fact that when I was talking with my coworkers about it, most of my male coworkers were pretty apathetic to it. They didn't really care a whole lot about it. They thought it's whatever. But most of my female coworkers were the ones who were more I wouldn't say up in arms, but more not happy about it. And I feel like that's something that, the whole point of Trump trying to have her as his VP candidate is the fact that, she's a woman trying to bring over the female voters. But the fact that she did this, the Democrats would inevitably try to use that to swing female voters away.
I can imagine this shitty political cartoon right now.
I know,
and of course, there are Republican allies of Trump on Twitter that are basically saying that Trump can't do this. This would be tantamount to political suicide for Trump if he chose Noam.
No.
So, and speaking of Trump, he is on trial right now, if we wanted to talk about that for a couple seconds.
Well, I did apparently, from what I saw on Twitter, though, that one of apparently aides and staffers have been saying that his front runner for vice presidential candidate is Dr. Ben Carson.
Oh, he is so uninspiring.
I would love to have Ben. I wanted Ben Carson.
I like Ben Carson, honestly. I like Ben Carson.
I would like him, but he has the charisma of Ben Stein.
But I wanted Ben Carson to win the primary back in 2016. I'd like to see Ben Carson. But if we're all okay, Carl would like to come back up. He has something he'd like to add.
Okay.
Carl, come on back up.
Alright, so and this is about the dog thing. You know why I think people are so upset about the dog? It's because, and just hear me out, the decline of religion. Religion puts a certain value on human life, right? And with the decline of religion in the West, we have to cling on to something as we have to have, something else has to have that value. And a lot of people own pets, and the majority of those pets are canines. Therefore, we have that special attachment to canines. And not to mention, too, I think the downfall of religion in the West and less value on human life is due to the abortion movement and the sex revolution, because they devalue people. Because the sex revolution, what does it teach? That people are just objects for pleasure, and the abortion movement's not any better. It says you can murder a baby in the womb. And yeah, I think all these things are the reasons why we have such an attachment to animals. And yes, I will agree, shooting a dog and then putting in your book is not a smart idea. No one with a brain would do that. But I do kind of see she didn't let the thing suffer. She shot it, and there was reason for her to shoot it. And yeah, I mean, that's why I think people are so up in arms about this, because animals, and yes, I do have an attachment to animals. I love animals, but yeah, that's my primary reasons.
I don't think it's connected to the decline of religion in the West at all. Humanity's always had a low value on its own life. That's been a consistent thing throughout our existence, is the utter brutality that we show towards one another. And the valuation of the animals have just gone up because we moved from a society that animals were tools. Cats were supposed to catch rats, and dogs were used for hunting or whatever else, or ratting as well. But that from moving from there, they became just objects and commodities to consume. This has to do with them just becoming something marketable. People buy cats because they're cute. They get cats because they are cute, and they just kind of incorporate them into their life. They get dogs for the same exact reason.
That's a lot better response than the one I was going to make. I was just going to jokingly say dog spelled backward is God. Coincidence? I think not.
No, I really do think that. I think it does kind of play in, because
I don't think it plays in as much though, but I can see the point you're trying to make, because the fact that when I go out, because of course when I'm a cashier and when I'm at work, every once in a while I'll see people who have their dog in a stroller, and I just think to myself, what? Why are we treating this like it's a baby? It's interesting that people nowadays, specifically the younger generations, of course, they don't want to have children, and so what do they do instead? They get a dog to act as if that is their child. They still have this attachment to want to have children in a way, but instead replace it with something else.
I'm with you there, Clements. I cannot stand the word fur baby. That is not a human child. That is
foul
an animal.
millennial tongue.
Stop acting like your pet is your surrogate child.
I see.
Not the same.
I see that specifically from millennials, though. That's a very millennial specific ideation. Those are the people that have been priced out of existence. The Zoomers are coming up, and they're actually able to thrive in the modern liberal bourgeois society.
Now, before I go back down, I would like to say this. I really do think horseshoe theory is real, because like what I've said in the side chat, it's so funny that the Atomwaffen and the Posadists both have the same goal.
No, okay, there's a huge ideological disagreement between the Atomwaffen division and Posadists.
Sir,
I've read Posadas.
Sir, that I had a faux pas, a misstep, if you will. Now, allow me to explain. Both want, and if I know the Atomwaffens, they want the atomic death of the world, so their idea of a utopian society can rise. I mean, it's funny how both ideologies, so wildly different, want a nuclear death of the world.
Well, when it comes down to it, they have two different theoretical reasons. The Atomwaffen division, oftentimes, they don't actually want nuclear war. They want a complete collapse. They want to cause a racial holy war. Meanwhile, the Posadist thinks that nuclear warfare is basically a signal to greater life out there that aliens can come down and then raise us up to a post-scarcity society. It's the Posadist also isn't really an accelerationist. They take no action to accelerate it. They think it is inevitable. They represent, kind of resemble left comms about the proletarians eventually rising up without party agitators. While Atomwaffen division, they also have a whole connection to Satanism and left-hand path magic, which informs their thinking about how just the essence of death is good and positive. There's been whole cases of one of the Atomwaffen division's backers, the O9A, doing straight up human trafficking, sacrifice, and rape in Russia, and they've also somehow co-opted the Montenegrin Orthodox Church.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. What's their
That's
connection to the
fun.
Orthodox Church? Backtrack. I mixed that real quick.
The Order of Nine Angels, it's a satanic left-hand path accelerationist organization, has allegedly co-opted the Montenegrin Orthodox Church, is active in Russia, the United States through its Front's Automorphin Division and another left-hand path organization in the UK. They act as kind of like this umbrella organization for all these accelerationist groups and act as a way for basically human trafficking networks. If you ever look into the right accelerationist groups, a lot of it you'll just see is the people who I would put in like a sadist category. They seek to cause and inflict pain on the world at all costs, which kind of deviates from the original theorists of accelerationism. It's kind of like someone reading any theory and grabbing what they want out of it to justify their own behavior. But it's a fascinating display from them because you don't know how someone gets this broken and degenerated. Like, do you guys remember that footage on Twitter of like a femboy being shot at?
No.
Okay, well, there's this thing. He survived. His ear was clipped. Guy was a huge member of Automorphin Division. And he was also like part of their like basically CP manufacturing division because these people like every part of degeneracy.
Wait. They have a what manufacturing?
Like they have like a whole network of it that's just dedicated to making underage pornography, child pornography. Like they have a whole section, and these people like also still try to get connection to state power as well. There's some of these people. One of the guys who was selling fake HRT to trans people was affiliated with both Patriot Front and Automorphin Division. Like, and also the recent attempt, there was a bombing attempted in 2022 by Automorphin Division people on a major, what was it, electric connection around Baltimore. It was in Maryland.
Around Baltimore, I probably would have known about it.
It was somewhere in Maryland. The main reason I know these guys, they were associated with a Automorphin Division member down in Florida who had a mental break after converting to Islam and murdered 2 of his roommates.
I remember hearing about that story via a
This
meme.
would have been on the news, and I don't remember hearing about it.
It was like several years back.
That was a while ago.
Okay.
But the roommate who lived reemerged trying to do a terrorist attack with his girlfriend in Maryland.
Okay. Okay.
I felt like Alex Jones there. Oh my lord.
Yeah, and you just took us all the way down to. We went so far down the rabbit hole there that for a moment we fell out the other side. It was like, yeah, Adam Waffen.
This felt like a classic.
What?
This felt like a classic episode of Monarchist Minute. Anyway, let us. Oh my gosh, I did it!
What? What'd you do?
What'd you do?
I said anyway. And you veterans of the show will know exactly why I am busting a lung right now laughing.
Oh no, that's a New York reference.
It was unintentional.
It was unintentional.
Let's actually go back and end our show with dedicating our end of show prayer to His Majesty the King of the Netherlands, who I will mention again from the top of the show. Today, as we are recording, is his birthday. And if you would like to join us on Monarchist Minute, we record Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern on our Discord server, link in the description. You can also follow us on all of our other social media platforms. Links to those will also be in the description. And now will the closing prayer.
All right. Please bow your heads and prepare to pray in the manner you are accustomed. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Heavenly Father, we pray for the safety of the Dutch royal family. Help them prosper. Help the Dutch nation prosper. May peace and prosperity fill their days. And Lord, we also pray for peace and safety for our country, as we expect that tensions will continue to rise as this election year continues, and it might result in violence and suffering in ways that we probably can't imagine. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you to everyone in the office. I think this is a record attendance tonight.
Yes, this is a record attendance. We had a grand total of 8 or 9 different people listening at one time. Thank you, everyone.
I think we peaked at 10, but
Yeah, no, we peaked at 10.
Thank you all for joining. We love having you here. We hope to see you next week. And for everyone who's listening on YouTube or Spotify, Podbean, wherever you listen, we hope you're enjoying this podcast. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America. Good night. Until next time.